Hey guys, so welcome back. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about lessons, teachings, and suffering. Again, if you get something from this, please give me the old thumbs up or the like, depending on where you are. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Patreon, please join. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. So, suffering. Suffering is a great indicator that there is something for us to learn, pay attention to, that there's a lesson or teaching in what we're experiencing. This is 100% of the time. So anytime that we're suffering, this is a good time for us to stop and pause and to introspect and to look at our situation and to see what we could learn. Now, when I say learning, I'm not talking about things from, say, a psychological perspective. Not to say that there isn't something you could realize psychologically about your situation. And I'm also not talking about, relational. So let's say you're having a hard time because of a situation at work. You might think, well, I'm suffering. Does that mean I should leave work? Or does that mean that this person at work is not treating me fairly? This isn't really what I'm talking about. This isn't really what spiritual teaching is about. Those are practical ideas, and those are things that you should explore with your psychologist or your counselor or someone else. From a spiritual perspective, we're always concerned with our inner state. And so suffering for us is something to draw attention to where we're feeling resistance in our mind, heart, or gut. What are we resisting? Why are we interested in resistance? Well, because resistance creates the illusion of a separate self, what we call in this teaching the ego. So the ego, you could say, is the source of our suffering, or you could flip it around and say that the suffering is an indication that we are creating or strengthening our ego. What that means for us is that if anytime we're suffering, we can instead flip it around and say, I'm definitely suffering from this situation. What do I need to pay attention to about something I'm thinking or something I'm feeling? And again, the feeling is going to be somewhere here in our throat or our heart, our solar plexus, our belly, or down in our gut somewhere. And I don't want to get into the whole technique of unwinding these tensions here in this video today, but basically the yogic approach, the tantric yogic approach, allows us to gradually unwind these tensions so that we experience freedom, which means that in a stressful, what maybe was once a stressful situation, we now have freedom to choose what we'd like to do, how we'd like to act. Otherwise, we are compelled by the suffering or by the tension. We feel like we really don't have much choice. We just have to act in a certain way. So these two, suffering and lessons in life, you could say, or teachings, what I like to call teachings, are in a yin-yang relationship to one another. So we want to notice when one is present, the other is also present. So if I am suffering, I'm kind of on one side of this scale. I'm creating ego. I'm miserable, right? I'm miserable because of it. And it means that I'm resisting something that is. And I'm also confused about the nature of reality in some way. If I can recognize that, right? If I can become awake to that, which is something we can do at any time, then I can flip that around and begin to pay attention. Okay, where am I feeling this tension or this resistance? Can I learn to just let that be, to be present with that, to not judge, to not wish it away, just allow it to be there, to relax with it, to be present with it. So it's not to ignore it, but to actually pay attention. Then we find over time, with practice, those things begin to change. And then as they change, our behavior changes and how we feel about our situation changes. So this is something I just wanted to share with you guys. I think there's a lot of sticking points for many of us in the current situation. The world simply really does seem to be at what appears to be a crossroads. Maybe it always feels that way for everybody, but I've been around for several decades now, and it does seem like this particular time is maybe more of everything than it has been in the past. And more stressful, more division, more political things going on, more disease with the coronavirus and the pandemic. So I think there's a lot that we can potentially start to feel suffering around. We can start to feel that tension that until the pandemic ends, we're going to be suffering. Until I can get a job, I'm going to suffer. Until people start treating me differently or treating different groups differently or whatever it might be, that we're going to suffer. And I just offer this as a way of approaching your suffering, and instead of simply suffering with the suffering, choosing to actually bring awareness to it, and by doing so, turning the suffering into a lesson, into a teaching, showing you where you are creating resistance. And again, resistance is always felt in the body. The beautiful thing about having a human body is it doesn't lie. It will always tell us the truth about where we are and how we're really feeling if we pay attention to it. So we can create all kinds of crazy ideas in our head, but ultimately we can feel in our body what is really true or not. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this helpful or useful. I'd love to know if you have had any situations, maybe recently or in the past, that have caused you suffering, but then eventually you were able to perhaps learn a deeper truth about yourself or about a situation, or again, about how you hold tension so that it actually turned out to be a blessing and not a curse. This is ultimately what we'd like to do on this path, is continually learn to turn our suffering into lessons, and therefore use the very act of living a human life, which for many people, I think for everybody really, without awareness, is full of suffering, to use that to propel us forward on our spiritual path. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please again give me a thumbs up, a like. If you have a question, leave it in a comment below, and please subscribe or join the Patreon page. Subscribe to YouTube or join the Patreon page. Thanks everyone, and namaste.